Okay, this is part two to the pre-need conversation at Passing Conversations. And Tracy was about to tell us something about merchandise. Is that right?
Absolutely. But in looking at the price sheet, I also need to say that there are services that are considered minimum services instead of full services, where you can choose to, instead of doing full services like a full traditional funeral service, you could do a minimum service like an immediate burial where you wouldn't need embalming or something like that. So they're lower cost. And those are always options to people. So if they come in and they find that things are just too expensive, they can cut their costs by using partial services or less expensive merchandise. And so that brings us to merchandise.
Okay.
Okay, so when you are at the funeral at home and you have decided what kind of service you're going to do, if you're going to do a funeral, there are a couple of things you're absolutely going to need. You're going to need a casket. And so you would select that casket. If you're selecting that casket on a pre-need, you would be guaranteed that casket at that price. But let's say that 10 years from now, that casket company no longer makes that casket that you chose. So what would happen is your selection would cross over to what they're now offering. So if you ordered a 20 gauge casket that had stationary arms, which that's the part that you hold on to, and it didn't have any special paint on it, and it just had a crepe interior, and it wasn't a sealer casket, well, you could pick out a casket that would meet that criteria, and you wouldn't be charged anything more for it. So that's how that's guaranteed.
What about the vault? Isn't there?
There are vaults. Okay, so vaults are not required by law, but they can be required by cemeteries. So if you're going to be buried in a cemetery that is a controlled cemetery or a private cemetery, they get to make their own rules. And so they may say, to be buried in this cemetery, you must be in a vault.
So it's your casket inside a structure called a vault.
Right. And vaults...
And in the ground.
Yes. And vaults, just like caskets, are there are various kinds. There are concrete ones, there are steel ones, there are polymer kind of thing caskets, and so you choose the kind of casket you want, and the same would hold true for your vault. The same would hold true for your vault. That holds true for your casket. Once you choose the type, that type would be guaranteed. Now there are some things that funeral homes won't guarantee because they have no control over them. For instance, one of those things would be a headstone. So if you wanted a headstone, that would not go under a guaranteed item. I don't know if a vault is. I can't remember if a vault is guaranteed or not. But the thing is that those are coming from other companies. The funeral home is not providing that. They don't carry it in stock. And so they can't guarantee the price of it. They have to go out and get that somewhere else. So those things are called cash advances. And you can put those in your pre-need, but all you do is put an allowance. So let's say that you want to buy a headstone, and in today's market, the headstone you want is $1,000. So you've put $1,000 into your pre-need, and when you die, if that headstone has gone up to $2,000, well, you have $1,000 to go toward it. You need to come up with another $1,000 or choose a lesser expensive headstone. So that's how those things are handled. Cash
so you don't lock that in. You don't lock that price in. And no. Why is that? It's because it's not here.
Because
it's not in your inventory.
Home, right, it's not in our inventory, so we can't guarantee it.
Okay.
It is in someone else's inventory. And they're not the funeral home, they're not going to guarantee their prices. Mm-hmm. So in that circumstance, it goes as a cash advance. Things like flowers, stationery, all those kinds of things, because those are all purchased from a different company, not from the funeral. We don't produce any of that. So those things are cash advance. It seems odd to me as a funeral home that the casket is a guaranteed item because I don't manufacture caskets. So,
right.
But I have to guarantee the price for it. So you may purchase a casket at $1,000, and today it might only cost me $700, but I charge you $1,000. By the time you die, that casket might cost me $3,000. but I can, I still have to provide it for the $1,000 you paid for it. So that's just, that's why pre-needs are wonderful for you, because you don't carry the burden of inflation. So you have the vaults, you have all kinds of other things that people choose, like releasing of doves, releasing of balloons.
Doves, like birds?
Yes, like birds. They want some
And
birds
balloons.
to fly away.
And you're in charge of that, or do the family bring those?
If you ask the funeral home to do it for you, we'll do it for you, which usually people will ask us because they're just not in a frame of mind to be able to do it themselves.
Where do you get doves?
There are companies that just have that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you just call them up and say, I need a
Dozen
dove
birds.
release, and they'll say, how many doves you want? You tell
All
them.
right.
And that's the cost.
Okay.
Let's see some of the other things. Maybe they may have a choir come in. They may have professional mourners come in. They may have dancers, praise dancers come in. I mean, there's all kinds of things.
What is a professional mourner?
Yeah, that's unique. There are people who will come in and mourn. They will lament, and that kind of thing. But there are some religions that want that.
Right,
they want
right.
the criers, and the mourners there, and so they have professional people who do that.
Okay, well, thanks for explaining it to me. I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
And there's, like I said, there's praise dancers. They'll come in and do a interpretive dance to a song that is meaningful to you, and so you pay for those praise dancers. Some don't charge, some do. You might have musicians who come in. There are also things called honorariums that may be an expense for you. Some religions, you give the preacher an honorarium. It's like a tip for coming in and doing your service. You may give the piano player an honorarium. You may give the singers who come in and honor it. There are all kinds of people who come in and do things that you give. They will either have a price that you have to pay them, or they may just say, just whatever you think it means to you, So then you pick a figure, give it to them. But even in those situations, there are norms in the area, and your funeral director can advise you on that. But
do you sometimes supply these people? Do you?
I don't sing at anyone's funeral. If that's what you're asking.
I've heard you sing. You've got a beautiful voice.
Yes. For instance, we have people who will come they haven't been to church in decades, but they want a preacher, and they don't have one. So they'll ask my husband, who is
Public speaker.
Yeah, he's a public speaker, and he's also in the clergy at our church. He'll come in and do that for you. Or I have often called missionaries or elders in our church, or because our church does that kind of thing for free. They don't charge. And I've been asked to play an instrument. I don't charge for that, especially at a baby's funeral. I play the auto harp. I'll play lullabies, but I don't charge for that. And it's really up to the person. But this is my company. It's my funeral home. But those things are things that are part of me, and I don't charge for that. For instance, I'm an artist, a professional artist. So this is one of my paintings.
I know, isn't that beautiful?
And I gave out, this year, I gave out a print of this to every family and every church that we did a service for.
Wow.
And I gave anyone who wanted a copy, I gave free copies out the whole year to everyone. So if you had a service and 200 people attended and each one of them wanted a picture, I gave it to them.
That
so
is
things
such
like
a nice thing to do.
Oh, well, thank
you. So if anybody out there wants a copy of this picture, just let us know.
Yeah, let us know. So that was my goal for 2024.
Who pays for
I do. I pay for all of it.
Okay.
But that's
really nice.
That's that's part of me.
It's something you offer.
And that's something I want to do for people. It makes me feel like I help them, recover from such a tragedy. And so there are people out there who want to help you, who are not going to charge you for things. And
right.
Sometimes your funeral director knows who they are. Sometimes you know who they are, your friends and family, or people who love the decedent. So those are ways to save money on your services.
So what other merchandise do we cover in the pre-need?
There, you can put your register book, your memory movie, your acknowledgement cards. I mean, just anything. Sometimes people want
Programs. What about programs?
Yeah, programs would be in there. Some people want wind chimes. You know, you can put all of those things in there. Flowers. You can put, you know, a couple $1,000s in there for flowers. You can, you know, pre-design your casket piece. You can put the money in there for that. That would be a cash advance, so it wouldn't be guaranteed, but you could put that allowance in there so your family doesn't have to come up with that. People put in money for clothing. You know, I had a grandmother come in who had a grandson who was an addict. So he didn't have money. So when she did her pre-need, she put in money for me to go out and buy him a suit, which I did. I went and bought it, brought him in. It was tailored and ready for the funeral. He looked great, you know, but people can put those kinds of things in their pre-need. So the money is sitting there. And it's helping them also if later on they have to go on to Medicaid. That money is not in their bank account. It's in a funeral policy, so it's not going to keep them from qualifying for medical services as they age, things like that.
Mm-hmm. So you can do a pre-need without putting any money down or signing up, right?
You can do an arrangement.
Arrangement.
Yeah, it is a pre-arrangement, but it is not a pre-need because
Okay.
it is not funded.
That's the
to
difference.
Be it's not going to freeze the price unless you pay for it. It's not going to freeze anything. It must be funded in order for it to freeze the price.
Okay.
But you can spread those payments out. You know, like my insurance company will spread them out over 10 years. So you can take 10 years to pay for it, but you are going to be paying that finance fee every month. So it's going to cost you a little more than your policy would cost you. Than, like if it's $5,000, it's going to cost you more than $5,000 by the time you pay it off.
Okay, so if we sat down and I checked all the boxes that I wanted at my services, then we would add it up what we think it would cost right now.
We would know exactly what it's going to cost right now.
And then that's what I would borrow in the insurance company. It's a loan from the insurance company.
Yeah,
so I'd either pay it off right then or pay it out.
It's a policy. You're signing up for a policy and you have the choice to pay it now, pay it 3, 5, 7, or 10-year increments. And even if you say I'm going to pay it in 10 years, but you find that you got money back on your taxes and you can pay it off next year, pay it off. Because you're going to save all those finance charges over the next 9 years. So, you know, it's you still manage it. It's your money. You're managing how you're paying for it. You manage the cost by paying it off earlier if you can.
And the one
just like with your car.
It's the one big advantage is that you save money.
You save tons of money.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. When I was interning in Dallas, the man that I worked for, you know, he had policies that he had sold 20, 30 years before, where those services at that time when the person actually died would be, you know, $20,000, $25,000, but they had purchased it when it was $1,800, you know, so.
There you go.
Yeah, so they got it at $1,800. So that's, you know, it is a wonderful thing if you can afford it. But also it's a great thing for estate planning because it helps you do your buy down for Medicaid or anything like that you need to do. And you're not paying taxes on that money.
Explain that.
Okay, so Medicaid is a service that the government provides. So let's say that you're old and you have to go into the nursing home. Well, there are fees. There's a cost for being in the nursing home. If you can qualify for Medicaid, Medicaid pays that fee. But Medicaid says that you have to only have a certain income or a certain amount of money that you own. So perhaps you can only have $1,500 of cash in your bank account, but you happen to have $5,000. Well, that's going to disqualify you. So you can do a buy down or a spend down. You can take those extra funds, go to the funeral home, pay for your funeral, and now you're qualified for Medicaid because you no longer own that money. The insurance company owns it.
know.
Yeah, you're the beneficiary of the policy and it will eventually pay for your funeral services, but it's not going to keep you from qualifying for medical assistance. So those is something that you need to plan for.
Okay. So any other advantages? I mean, why don't I just open a little savings account just for my services?
Great question.
And tell my kids, okay, now just save this for this.
Well, that's a good question, but it's the same thing. That is your bank account. It's your asset. It will keep you from qualifying for Medicaid.
Oh,
So and plus while it's there, you are still carrying the burden of inflation. So if you say, my funeral today is going to cost me $10,000, I'm going to put $10,000 in my savings account.
Right.
You don't die for 10 years. That funeral now costs $20,000. Well, you only have $10,000. So now your family has to come up with the other $10,000. Plus, if you needed to go into a nursing home and you needed to qualify for Medicaid, now you have that money. Medicaid can either take it or not qualify you. And you could say at that point, well, I'll take that $10,000 and go buy my pre-need. Yes, you could, but now that what was going to cost you $10,000, 10 years ago, maybe $20,000. So you're in the same situation where you're carrying the burden of inflation instead of the funeral home.
okay. So I think you explained this, but I want to make sure you said I understood. So like I could sign up right now and pay monthly, and then come into some inheritance money and pay it off, and I'd be done with it. And okay, all right, that sounds good.
Yeah, so it's just like when you finance your car. If you're going to finance your car and you can pay it off early, well, you save all
And
those
there's no
extra
penalties
finance.
for
Yeah, there's
that.
no penalty. No.
Okay.
And you don't have to pay all those extra finance charges. It's done when you pay it off, and it sits there and waits on you, and your cost never goes up. It stays right there. So when
Yeah.
you die, it's all taken care of. Now, let's say you bought it with me, and you went on vacation, which you do. You travel a lot. Maybe you're in New York and you die. So you can use that pre-need to, if you want to be buried in New York, or you can say, I still want to be buried in Texas at Tracy's funeral home, so we're going to call New York and say, can you pick her up and embalm her and send her to us? So in addition to that pre-need, you may have some fees for your airfare. New York may charge more money for their embalming, so you may owe a couple $100.
And you have to be embalmed in the state that you die. Is that correct?
You're not supposed to. In the state of Texas, you cannot cross state or county lines without being embalming, unless you're in a refrigerated vehicle.
Oh.
So if you had a truck that had a refrigeration unit, they could carry you across county lines, but doesn't mean they can carry you across state lines, because that new state may say, oh no, that person has to be embalmed before they can come into our state. So it really depends on the laws of the state. But yes, so you would, and there's no way the airline is going to take you without you being embalmed.
Right,
You have
right.
to be embalmed. So if you didn't want to be embalmed and you wanted to come to Texas from New York, we would have to clear it with every state that we're going to be carrying you in a refrigerated truck. Is it okay to go through their state? We'd have to get all those permits, adding quite a bit of time and expense, because you're going to pay a per mile fee for the vehicle and the funeral director that is carrying you overland. It's called overland travel. So that is for large distances usually more expensive than flying.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And
I need to
because
stop. I need to stop traveling abroad.
Yeah. Oh,
Guess I'm
yeah.
getting close.
If you're gonna travel abroad, get some insurance for it, because if you die in
That's
a
a
foreign
good idea.
country, oh my gosh, it's crazy. But yeah, so you want to make those plans ahead of time.
Is there anything else that you have that you want to mention from this?
Yes, there are. There's one more thing I think that I would like to mention, and then I would like to go over ways of funding. But when a person passes, if they're grossly overweight, there are extra fees for that. And a lot of times you don't understand why that is, but I'll explain it to you. Let's say that you die at home and you weigh 500 pounds. So we have to have special equipment, because our regular equipment is rated for people who weigh 250 pounds or less. So now we have to have heavier duty equipment that we've had to purchase. Not only that, but one person can't pick you up. We may have to send 4 or 5 people. All of those people have to be paid for. So you have increased the amount of your expenses because of that. Now when it comes to embalming, well, again, we have to have heavier duty equipment, but it costs more, takes more time, it takes more chemicals. All of that is expense. And the prices that are that are across the board or for an average, not for those people out of that average. So overweight people are out of that average, and so they pay extra. It's an oversized fee.
So is the weight there 250 and over? Or is it 300? Where do you?
Mine breaks at 250. So like if you weigh 249 pounds,
Yeah.
your average size. If you weigh 251 pounds, you're into an oversized weight capacity, and so
Okay.
you are going to pay a little more. If you surpass the 299 pounds and go to
Yeah.
300 pounds, well, now I've got to add another person or two, so your fee is
Yeah,
going to
I see.
increase again.
Okay.
If you go up to 450, so it increases
That's
according
good to
to your
know.
weight.
I never thought about
Yeah,
that.
believe me, you fit into the average size. Not a problem. So yeah, so that is something I want people to know. And also, there may be, you have to buy a larger casket.
Oh, yeah.
So, and those caskets are more expensive because one, there's more material in it, but they're not just a stamp and press. You know, it's not on the assembly line. They have to be handmade and hand welded and all that. So they're much more expensive, much more expensive. So that is something else to look forward to. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about is payment, how the funeral home accepts payment. So if you come in and you pay at the funeral home with cash, that's fabulous. You pay and you're done.
This is at need.
That would be at need.
Yeah.
If you're paying with insurance, which can be at need or could be pre-need, if you're paying with life insurance, there is usually a processing fee because we have to go through a processor, because what happens is your life insurance, they have to have a death certificate. Well, your death certificate's not going to be issued for at least 2 to 6 weeks. Well, the funeral home has to start paying out money. They have to pay the employees. They have to buy your casket. They have to, so they're issuing payment out on your behalf. They've got to have that cash in to pay it out. So there's processing companies that say, okay, yes, this person has a life insurance policy. It's in good standing. So we will advance you the funding and we will carry this burden while the death certificate is being processed. I've had death certificates that have taken years to get. So it can be a long process, it's not quick. And so that processor will charge a finance fee. It's just like getting a loan, really. They're advancing that to you. So you have a choice. Let's say your funeral is $5,000, but you have $200,000 in insurance. If you don't need that money to live on during that time, it's better for you to only take and process that $5,000 because you're only paying the processing fee on what you process. You can process that other money later on yourself once you get the death certificate. If you can wait those 6 to 12, even 6 months, whatever. If you can wait that amount of time.
Okay, say that somebody in my family passed away, and I am the beneficiary of a big amount, way over. Well, do I come in and say, well, I've got the life insurance on the way? Do you hold off things, or can you start right then taking care of business? Or
if you can start right then, because you can assign the amount of the funeral out of that policy to the funeral home.
Okay.
Now, if you say, I don't want to do that, I want to wait till I get my life insurance or get the money, the funeral home is going to have to take your loved one and put them in refrigeration, which you will pay for that refrigeration, a daily fee. Those are not small fees. They are expensive because it's the equipment, it's the electricity that goes into it, so wear and tear on the equipment. Plus, someone has to babysit that body. We have to go in and check it every day and see how the skin is holding up. And the end result in that case is not usually as good as it could have been if you had taken care of that person in the beginning, because they may suffer freezer burn on their skin. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So each day they're in refrigeration, the quality of their body can deteriorate. It's like if you have meat in your refrigerator, it's only going to stay in there a week or so before you start having problems. If you want us to keep this person for a month or so while you're processing your insurance, it's intense.
okay.
So those fees are put on there. So you have your insurance funding fee, and usually the funeral home will add a document fee to fill in those papers, because it's taking extra time that they haven't factored into their overhead, because not everyone pays with insurance. So it's a privilege that that you're going to use, and so you end up paying for that. There's also crowdfunding, which has come into effect in the last decade or so. People will do a GoFundMe or something. My funeral home does not recognize crowdfunding. The reason we don't is because we've been ripped off too many times. People will start this crowd fund and they'll collect all this money, and whoever is in charge of the crowd fund will take the money and run. They don't pay the funeral home, so we've been left holding the bag too many times. We don't recognize that. We do, however, have our own crowdfunding company. It's a funeral company that will guarantee the funds go to the funeral home, and then if there's anything extra, we will disperse it to the family. But we get our money, we get paid first.
Good.
You can pay by credit card. Using a credit card and with crowdfunding, you're going to pay those extra fees, because every one of these ways of paying, they're not doing it for free for you, you're paying fees. So there are additional fees for that. There are donations. You can come into a funeral home and you can say, okay, let's, during the 4 days until we bury her, we want to accept donations. And your friends can call the funeral home, make a donation through PayPal or Venmo or all of those kinds of things. Or they can come in with a check or cash or their credit card, and they can make a donation at the funeral home. Those things that are using, like credit card stuff, they will also incur those extra fees. But you can do a donation, so that's easy to do. You can also do a funeral loan. We have a company that will qualify you if your credit is okay.
Run out of time,
Yep.
so we need to wrap up.
If you use the finance company, it's just like using any finance company. You're going to have those fees. Or you can do in Texas, it is illegal for the funeral home to accept a payment plan. We can't finance you because we're not a bank. So you would have to go to your bank and get those fees. But you can do like a signature loan or a collateralized loan or things like that. But there's money out there available to you. But my suggestion is that you look and see where you can cut costs.
Nice. Well, I hope you've learned something. I certainly have, and I'm ready to get my pre-need started today. So when we close the camera, we're going to get busy on my business. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Judy Ruth, Tracy Lee at Passing Conversations, and please like us and subscribe. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.